Friendswood City Council regular meeting and announce that we have a quorum. Tonight's invocation will be led by Deacon Paul Robinson from Mary Queen Catholic Church. Please remain standing and we'll say the pledges after the deacon finishes.
Mayor Foreman, council members, guests, we begin in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Lord God, we come before you this day assembled as a community. We come together as your people to petition you for all that is good, the gifts that you give to us in our city, in our country, in our nation. We ask your blessing upon our council members, Lord, that you would give them wisdom, grace for this council meeting, that you would watch over them, that you would bless the people of Friendswood once again. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Father, Son,
Thank you,
Holy
Deacon.
Spirit.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Item 4 is council comments and reports. You all hearing me back there, Katie? I'm good? Okay. I'll kick this one off this month. We had a severe weather open house at the library a few days after our last council meeting, I believe, and it was a great success. Thank you for everybody that worked that event. All the library staff helped out. Of course, our Brian Mansfield, Brian Holmes, all the emergency ops people were there, and we had a fire truck there, so I went for sure. So I want to see a fire truck. So great turnout, great event. I'm glad that we're doing it that way. In past years, we usually have had sort of a get-together with all the vendors that we use in case of an emergency and sort of all get on the same page. But I like including the public on this one, and I think we'll continue to do it that way going forward. It's great to have people come through, get information, and I had a goodie bag full of stuff. It was like Halloween there too. Picked up a lot of good trinkets and everything. So anyway, thanks to all that supported that, and I'll pass to who am I passing to? Steve, you got anything from?
Yes. A couple things real quick. The summer reading program at the library is coming to a close, but there will be a summer night video game party for the 11 to 18-year-olds on Friday, August 13th. Starts at 6:30. And the other thing is I had the opportunity of chairing the new elected officials training. It's the first one in almost 2 years because of COVID. It was in San Antonio. There was 300 people there. They had to bring extra chairs in. A lot of people who got elected in the last round, and it was real fun. And one of the speakers was a young man who's a new attorney with the TML, and I was waiting to introduce him. And he asked me where I was from, and I said Friendswood, and he said, "Oh, my aunt and uncle live in Friendswood." And I said, "Well, who are your aunt and uncle?" And he said, "Connie Brakebill, who's literally like a neighbor of mine." So it's a small world. But there's another training. We don't have anyone up here that's new, so none of you need it. But there's another training in Bastrop in a couple of weeks. So
You did that in your position as?
I am, thanks to Mike Foreman volunteering me, and I got elected to the Texas Association of Mayors and Councilmen, and that group runs the training for TML. And because I'm the president of that group, I'm on the board of TML as well.
Well, we're lucky to have somebody with your experience and age
It ends
representing us.
Thanks. My term ends in October. So.
All right. Well, I'll be looking around. Robert, Sally, you want?
I like that age comment. I wanted to say two things. One, I'm sure everybody's noticed that the sidewalk program has begun. We're very, very excited about that. That's the $3.5 million grant that our FDEDC received. Also, CEDC is going to be taking a tour of it's called Edo, but it's east end of downtown. So that group is out kind of doing some, I'm going to call it benchmarking. I know that's an old term, but benchmarking. The group had gone to McKinney a few weeks ago, or actually probably a month ago now. So they're kind of taking a look at what other communities are doing, trying to, all the best ideas are stolen. So we're trying to do some of that. But I think that's it. The one thing I would like to say, and this is more of a public address, I would really like to encourage those who are not vaccinated, please get vaccinated. I think it'd be important.
I have nothing since I last meeting a few weeks ago.
Slacker. Robert, the guy who goes to more meetings than any other council member.
Well, I don't know about that. But I do want to mention that planning and zoning did lift the restrictions on commercial buildings outside the downtown districts. They can now be 70 feet instead of 40 feet, and they did unanimously pass that. And I have some exciting news. I got off the phone with Tyler Drummond with Honorable Mark Henry's office, Judge Henry's office, and they informed me there is consensus that the commissioners are going to fund $7.5 million for our 1959 Beamer Road inline detention. So I was really excited to hear that. Harris County has agreed to $15 million. So we're going a long way of getting that moving, and I know Hill will be working directly with Harris County Flood Control District. So that was really exciting news for me, so I really did enjoy hearing that.
Great. Mr. Scott.
I don't have anything.
Brent?
John got a hole in one.
You did? Hole in one? On a golf course?
I did.
Wow.
Hey,
A real legitimate golf course.
Speaking of golf, Brent's daughter made the high school golf team.
Yeah,
Wow.
congratulations.
Wow. Hey,
It's awesome.
man, this is a golfing end of the table down here. Okay. Item 5, public comment. In order to comply, do I have cards? I do need to read this. In order to comply with the provisions of the Texas Open Meetings Act, the City Council may not deliberate any item not listed on the agenda. As such, the City Council will listen to public comment and may, 1, refer the item to City Management for further action, or 2, direct staff for the placement of said item on a future agenda. During public comment, the public shall refrain from any outbursts or interjections, including but not limited to applause, disparaging noises, and remarks. Furthermore, any personnel complaints against a city employee, aside from the city manager, city attorney, or municipal judge, shall not be discussed and shall be referred to city management. Each speaker shall give his/her name for record-keeping purposes. The rules allow each person 3 minutes to present information. The time clock will flash a yellow light when there are 30 seconds remaining and flash a red light and a beeping sound when the time has expired. Please wrap up your comments at that time. Mary and Abbas Masoom.
Hello, good evening. We got vaccinated, but on low immunity, still I have to wear mask. My name is Mary Masoom, my husband Abbas Masoom. We lived in Friendswood for 33 years. We lived at 404 Pine Creek Drive, and we need your help. My backyard fence is 21 years old. It buffers my home against Irish Green 2, which was built in 1992 and is a set of commercial buildings. Parkwood Village was developed in single-family residence, but then changed to Garden Home District, still residential in 1993, Section 8. The supplementary district regulations say a commercial interest must maintain 8-foot fences barrier to protect the residents from the commercial activities. I have given you a copy of the supplemental regulation and also Mr. David O'Farrell responsibility regarding our fences. I have also given you a color copy of every backyard fences on Pine Creek Drive that shares the boundaries commercial line with the O'Farrell commercial building. and I am here to ask you, please, if it looks like the overall interests are following the ordinance and maintaining the fences, they are required to do so. I have tried to work with the Code of Enforcement Department, but I have not achieved enforcement of the ordinance. I ask you please tonight to help me protect my property and to make the commercial interest in Friendswood follow the ordinance and be a good neighbor. A good, healthy fence create a good neighbor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Don Johnson.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak before you all. And I want to say before I get started that Councilman Griffon and Mayor Mike have been great champions for our neighborhood and trying to do something about drainage, and we certainly do appreciate it. And notwithstanding that, I'm going to bring up a problem tonight and ask for your help again, because there's some things that I've just not been able to get resolved. I've handed out a plat of Timber Creek Golf Course, and there's some little yellow highlights on it. And what it's talking about, there's a high flow bypass which connects the big clover leaf that goes up into the golf course and cuts by that. That big clover leaf is where Turkey Creek and Mud Gully come in. So trying to push Clear Creek up there and have all three of those creeks come together at one time causes a log jam. And it's just a real problem for drainage. And that was why in the original plat, they designated a high flow bypass should go through that area. And it even denotes on there that Clear Creek should be going through that area. But it can't, of course, because it's got a plug in it. And so that's kind of what I wanted to ask your all's help with. I know y'all are not responsible necessarily for the creek, but one of the things I did note on here, which I thought was kind of unusual, which was item number 14 in the notes, said basically any government can use this easement to solve a problem. So I don't know if they were ever thinking about a situation like this, where I've spoken for the past 20 years to the drainage district and just never been able to get down the road with it. If y'all know far enough back to where David Kasarik was the general manager, I heckled him enough that he went and talked to the property owner and came back and told me he had gotten permission from the property owner to remove that plug. And I thought, great, we're there. We've solved the problem. Unfortunately, he told me later that they couldn't get consensus on the board to go pull that out and do anything about it. And so we've been at a stalemate for the past 20 some odd years about doing something about that. I do understand that there's some effort to get a study done, and I'm a little concerned. I don't think the question is the study. At this point, I think the question is, what was legally approved 20 some odd years ago? Why was that never implemented? And look at it from the legal perspective of doing what the plat outlines should be done. The looks like my time's up. I get going and it seems like it just goes by in an instant.
See you next month. Thanks, Mr. Johnson.
Listen, thank you much.
Item 6, communications from committees and special reports. A, receive the annual tax collection report from Purdue, Brandon, Fielder, Collins, and Mott LLP. Mr. Mike Darlow with Purdue, Brandon, Fielder, Collins, and Mott LLP.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Good to see everybody. See if I do this right or not. No? Left and a right, right? See, I have a law degree, not an IT degree. Oh, I gotta turn it on.
Yes, sir.
That helps. Good to see everybody. See, I told you. Well, it's been an interesting year. Last year, I mailed in my report to you. Of course, nobody was really being seen or in public, so I gave you an update at that point in time of what was going on, and since then, we've had a fair amount of activity for you, and here we are yet again with another year and another year of taxes. And since the report from last year, we've collected a considerable amount of money for the city, and the report that I prepared for you tonight shows that we have roughly $466,000 of unpaid taxes for all years through 2020. 266,000 of that was your 2020 taxes that were just turned over to us July 1st. In the month of July, we mailed out demand letters to everyone that had not paid the city. We started our outbound calling campaign. And of course, the numbers that I provided for you tonight have since gone down because we've had several people that have come in and paid in the interim period. And I'll just give you a quick update on the tax and then a quick update on the fine and fee. I know the mayor's got me on the timer here tonight. So of the money that was owed to us, how's it broken down? You can see the largest single category we have is what we label as action pending. A lot of that, again, is new 2020 taxes that we're working on. Every time I do come to visit with y'all, I point out the deferrals because I think it's important for the community to know if you're over 65 and it's your homestead, you can defer the payment of your taxes. And if that happens and you owe delinquent taxes, you don't get letters, phone calls, or lawsuits from us. We just monitor it periodically to make sure everybody that's getting those deferrals are entitled to them, excuse me. And if that changes, of course, then we proceed with our collection activity. The other thing I'd point out on this for you is the very small sliver that's in bankruptcy and trust that only represents 1% of all the money. And I point that out to say that things are well in Friendswood relative to people's ability to at least pay their taxes. This is a very nominal amount of money. Doesn't impact the delinquent roll at all. I'll skip the second, go to the third in the essence of time. So of the money that's owed, how is it broken down? You can see almost 50% of what is owed to us is just 2020 taxes. And you'll note when I told you about what was owed at the end of June when we got the 2020s, it was $266,000. When we prepared this report earlier in the month of July, it was down to $175. So we've already made considerable progress in getting the money paid to the city. I'll skip through these. I'll just take you to the last one. I can go back to any of these in detail. But so last year, this time, July, there was $344,000 turned over to us to collect, which was higher than it had been in prior years. I think part of that, of course, was due to COVID. You did have people that were not able to pay their taxes in a timely manner. And you can see that in the 12-month period that ended June 30 of 2021, almost 84.5% of that money was collected or resolved. So along with other prior years, a good, strong collection of our first year for you. So what about this year? And of course, since we're just 1 month in, I just really like to show it to you and to the audience from the standpoint of the fact that the city collects the bulk of the taxes that are owed to it. Tax office does a good job for y'all, and you can see that just a little bit under 1.5% of the over 18 million that you levied in taxes has been collected. So when I say you don't have a delinquent tax problem, you really don't. And if you look back historically, the city's been very strong in the almost 98.5 to 99% collection by July of every tax cycle. So that's a quick update on our tax portion. I would mention, Mayor, that we have not had a tax sale on behalf of the city in almost 2 years. Again, a reflection of the property owners, the property that we have to take to suit that ultimately gets to sale but gets paid before. So that's why we have no inventory and we have very few tax sales. So with that, Mayor, I'd answer any questions that you or the council may have on our tax portion of our report.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Real quick, court fine and fees. We have a great working relationship with Pat and her staff and with the municipal court. You can see that we've got an aggregate resolution rate over time of almost 80% of all the money that's been turned over to us to collect in your unpaid court fines and fees. You can see there historical numbers as far as addresses corrected, numbers of mail-outs that we've done, phone contacts. So we've had a lot of activity with people that owe money to the city on their court fines and fees. And then I've given you 3 maps, and I'll take you to the last map So this is a map of the United States that pin drops showing people that still owe the city money. From Washington all the way to the East Coast, down south, up north, all around. Of course, the bulk of it is in Texas. And the key in our court fine and fee efforts is to get the notice to the right person. And a lot of people, I know you'll be shocked to know, don't give good addresses or maintain their addresses when they move. And so part of our battle is just getting information to the right people. We drive it to the court and then let the court handle that. Again, that's a quick update on that, Mayor. And as always, we appreciate the opportunity to work for the city. And if we can do anything for y'all, please let us know. Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to wait till winter, exactly. No.
Thanks,
Thank you all.
Counselor.
Appreciate your time. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Item 7, work session, receive and discuss a presentation regarding public safety, Murad Kabiri and Chief Bob Weiner.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. You may recall there have been a number of newspaper and social media posts in the last month regarding our public safety and one officer in particular, Officer Sarah Carter. I've asked Chief Wieners to give a presentation to you this evening about that particular situation and the circumstances and facts surrounding the case. And so he promises to keep his presentation below 9 minutes if we don't interrupt him, but feel free to interject and ask any questions you have along the way.
I'll take the over on that. Good to see Captain Eric Reyna, who looks a lot like Lieutenant Jimmy Price to me at a distance, and Deputy Chief Josh Rogers there.
We clone them.
Well, cloned a good one.
So just
Thanks, Captain.
all right, moving right along here. Appreciate your patience while I get organized. You know, as we go ahead and we begin my presentation, obviously, I've already said good evening to you all in the back room, but good evening again. The purpose of this presentation is to provide information relating to Officer Carter in her testimony in a Galveston County DWI trial on July 7th and 8th. In the interest of time and to better understand established case law, I've provided a supplemental information packet for you. And the information's organized in accordance with how the slide presentation will go. I will provide you factual information and let you decide if any questions remain relating to public trust with respect to Brady, the Brady disclosure rule, and also the reasonable suspicion standard for vehicle stops. Then finally, I'll provide you some information on how we move forward from here. But Brady disclosure and the reasonable suspicion standard are going to be basically the two key points that we're going to talk about in this presentation. So up until now, only edited versions of a 90-second video have been played in a couple of media outlets. This is some of the evidence that the judge would not allow the jury to see in the trial. Next slide. So, the defense attorney has tried to spin this as a public trust issue and how well he addressed the matters in court. However, obviously the facts speak for themselves. The defense strategy in many DWI trials is to discredit or impeach the officer's testimony and the credibility of the officer. That's just the way that it is, because blood, breath, and video provide very strong evidence for the defense to repudiate. In this case, the defense raised questions of officer credibility from a July 2017 Internal Affairs investigation where there was no finding of misconduct. The facts relating to the vehicle stop on September 15th, 2019 speak for themselves. There they are. It was dark. She didn't know who was in the vehicle. She's white, he's white, and the arrestee lived in an affluent subdivision here in Friendswood. Next slide. So we've had some comments attributed to Kevin Petroff, who's the first assistant district attorney of Galveston County. So the number 2 guy, right? And, again, there seemed to be some comments that, quite frankly, didn't make any sense to me, when I read them in the paper, and I didn't even really try to sort through them. I did call the district attorney and told him, that, comments just didn't seem in sync with any information that we had gotten from them prior to the trial. He said that the ADA didn't say it. Okay, well, so there it is. So this is going to be really about the Brady disclosure rule. This is about police misconduct and an agency's responsibility to make a report of police misconduct. So if you'll take a look at your top sheet that was there in the packet, you're going to see several bullet points that are on there, but I'll just summarize them very quickly for you. That in summary, what that sheet really states is that where there is a finding of misconduct related to untruthfulness, moral turpitude, or bias, we have the obligation to notify the DA, and the DA has the responsibility to notify the defense. This was not the case. There was no finding of misconduct in the July 17 IA. Officer Carter was exonerated. So the investigator for that particular investigation is Captain Reyna, or was. There is no Galveston County policy for Brady material disclosure regarding police misconduct. And Harris County actually went ahead and published one back in October of 2017. But even then, I mean, it was 3 months after our incident, and prior to that, there was nothing out there in Brady disclosure guidance. There is no Galveston, excuse me. Now, the second pages are 2 recent court rulings that came out of the county. One is signed by Judge Ewing on the 28th of April, and one is signed by another county judge on the 27th of April. Both judges had different opinions about Brady material, and both orders conflict. One said it was, one said it wasn't. Our position is the same as ADA, one of the prosecutors, Kayla Allen, testified to, and that's the department's understanding of the Brady disclosure rule. See, in the first ADA, Kevin Petroff seemed to have a different opinion on what constitutes Brady material. The July 2017 IA complaint intake form contained coerced information. That information came from a 17-minute interview that was audio recorded. And as I put there in the last bullet, it clearly did not meet the standard of, criminal warning under Miranda or the administrative warning under Garrity. Next slide. So after the two judges' rulings, there is the next page should be the reasonable suspicion standard. So I ask you to take a look at that, because that is one of the issues that was at play in 2017, and it doesn't seem like anybody knew anything more about the standard in 2021 in that trial. Vehicle stops are based on the reasonable suspicion standard. However, it is probable cause that's needed for a citation to be issued or for an arrest to be made. Obviously, reasonable suspicion is a lesser standard, and you must be able to articulate reasonable suspicion. You may not be able to see it on video. You may not be able to know what the officer is thinking, but it must be articulated, either in the video or in the offense report. So Officer Carter testified truthfully and correctly that she had made no vehicle stops without reasonable suspicion of probable cause. That's what she told the investigator back in 2017. He looked at 250 traffic stops in 90 days worth of video. He did not find any instance where she had violated state law or department policy. The judge discounted this critical information in testimony offered by a female police officer and female prosecutors. All female prosecution side, all male defense side. In addition, the judge had previously signed 5 blood warrants for Officer Carter. So 5 search warrants to obtain blood. 2 in 2021, 2 in 2020, and 1 in 2019. All warrants contained the articulated reasonable suspicion standard, and the judge determined her to be credible and signed the warrants. The judge was sued in federal court in March of 2018 for accusing a public defender of over-lawyering, spending too much time and county resources in defending his clients. The judge settled the lawsuit in 2019. Settled is the key word. And his lawyer stated that he was exonerated. The judge accepted $3,000 in campaign donations from the defense attorney's law firm at an in-person fundraiser held on June 29, 2021, 1 week before the trial. Now, political donations is a sensitive topic, but they're a legitimate and necessary part of the election process. However, there is a high standard for the judiciary. And the Texas court rules require a judge to recuse himself or herself if he or she cannot be reasonably impartial or has bias against a party involved in a judicial proceeding. Next slide. So moving ahead, the city and the police department must seek to safeguard the reasonable suspicion standard for vehicle stops in citizen contacts or encounters. It's 60% of the work that we do. I mean, when you get a call into dispatch, we don't have dispatchers quizzing the caller about whether or not they have reasonable suspicion or probable cause. I mean, they call, we haul, and we get out there, we investigate, but it's up to us to go ahead and develop that reasonable suspicion into probable cause if it's appropriate. So this is the standard that is clearly established in federal and state case law, most recently affirmed in 2020 by the U.S. Supreme Court. So with that in mind, I kind of brought a, thought I had a manual with me, but you got it? Yeah, good. This is the Bible right here. So we send police officers to the academy, and they learn what they learn in, the traffic enforcement portion of the academy. But then the Texas District Attorney and County Attorneys Association, the guys who are supposed to know this, they publish these manuals, and we use them for training, not only in the field training program, but our supervisors are required to go ahead and supervise to the industry recognized standards that are in this manual. Next slide. And then finally, the community really has to recognize, the good officers out there doing their job, that are out looking for stuff on midnight shift, that are out looking out for the neighborhoods and who's trolling around in the neighborhoods. They're going to get complained on. But it's incumbent on them to act within the scope of federal and state law and city and police department policy. The police department is going to continue to abide by Brady disclosure rules and has, as it has in the past, and it'll also be watchful of situations where a judge rules or issues an order that conflicts with established legal standards. Next slide. So this is for you, the question part. I thought I'd go ahead and offer a Libyan fable that I pulled from a book I read back a while ago. Don't know if anybody's read it, but it's mandatory professional reading in all the military services. And so at the end it says, feathers not by others, hands are we now smitten? And the answer to that question is no, we're not. But when we see what we see and we know that, it's not right, then, good people need to go ahead and speak up. And that, I think, concludes my presentation.
Thanks, Chief.
You, Chief.
Appreciate it.
Any questions?
Steve.
I have a couple questions and I want to make a comment. Is that all right, Mayor?
You bet.
Bob, in one of the local papers, it stated that that Friendswood had one of the highest DWI stop rate or whatever you want to call it in Galveston County.
Yes, sir.
Does that surprise you? And then the second part of that is there a corollary? Do we have fewer DWI accidents because we pull more people over?
Well, I mean, the number of DWI accidents, so we probably had over 300 accidents last year. They're running above that, well above that. And, I don't know what's driving that situation because we're out there and we're visible on the roadways. So we had last year 30 DWI arrests last year in 2020, and right now we've had about 13 year to date. So, I mean, I think we're going ahead and holding the line on the DWI related accidents. Just as far as the number of stops that they compared to League City in Texas City in that article, I'm familiar with the article that you saw. Our guys are working. Our gals are working. They're out there when they have, self-initiated time that they're not tied up doing reports or, visiting a citizen or doing whatever. We expect them to go out there, enforce traffic law, and to do those types of things. Whether or not our people are working harder, I won't claim that. But what I will say is the dynamics in Texas City and League City are a lot different than here. So we have people that aren't tied up, and we have people that have the discretionary time to go out there and do some proactive police work. If I can get the next slide.
Steve, to add to that point, that same article indicated that we were on par with those other cities in 2018 and 2019. 2020 was the anomaly.
So what I thought I'd do is show you one of my favorite slides from the annual crime report. And it will really show how we cut crime by more than 50% over the last 10 years. And it is based on a business model of directing the activities of those officers during their self-initiated time. And finally, there's a comparison of the crime rate for Texas City, League City, and Friendswood. And these are apples to apples comparisons because it's, total number of incidents by population. So it's a fair comparison. That's where we're at. This is where they're at. And it's the business model that is going ahead and controlling the crime rate or driving it down.
My second question is, if somebody gets pulled over for suspicion of intoxication, and they're not, they're fine, how long is that stop going to take them before they probably get sent on their way?
So, it may take 15 minutes. Again, the officer is going to let them know, why they've been pulled over. But then they're going to conduct, standard field sobriety tests, as long as the person cooperates to, participate in those. Most of the situations we find, they don't want to give breath. We've got to get a warrant for their blood, which usually takes 2 hours from the time we stop them, which means that they've metabolized 2 hours worth of a blood alcohol content. But they'll be, if they'll cooperate and, they participate in the standard field sobriety test, we'll cut them loose. As a matter of fact, Officer Carter did that probably about 3 weeks ago, and we got a nice email from a citizen that she went ahead and stopped about how polite and how professional she was when she was out there. But the flip side of that is that if you get stopped, they smell alcohol, and you're not going to go, you're not going to cooperate, then you're going to probably go to jail. They're not going to leave you to drive off in your vehicle, if that's what they encounter. And the other thing, don't smoke weed when you're driving. There's way too many people around that are smoking and joking out there in the vehicle. The officer stops the vehicle, the window goes down, and the officer, gets enlightened by the smell of, marijuana smoke. No, it happens.
Well, let me make one comment. Nobody likes to get pulled over by the police, least of all me. I'm, in fact, very famous in my family for trying to talk my way out of situations. My kids make fun of it. But I have an experience. About a year and a half ago, I was picked on a jury in Galveston County. It was right before COVID. And it was a gentleman who had had several DWIs, and this was his third one, and he was picked up in Friendswood. One of Bob's young officers picked him up. And later, Sarah, Officer Carter, was part of the arrest. All of this, we watched it on the video cameras and all that in the trial. And then both officers testified. And Officer Carter was the most professional I had ever seen. She was awesome. Both officers were awesome in their testimony. So I got to witness her firsthand in a jury situation. And in fact, the judge, and it was a visiting judge, I can't remember his name, after the trial, and he had found out that I was a city councilman here, and he came into the jury room, and he told us that was the best arrest he had ever seen and the best testimony he'd ever seen by two police officers. And I told him to call Bob and tell him that. And now I couldn't tell Bob in advance that I was on a jury involving one of his officers, but he'd figured it out, and he did call you. And so I just want to say, I've seen her testify in court, and she was incredibly professional and accurate. And and as far as all your statistics on DWI, I mean, I completely support what you're doing. I think we need to be tough on it. We need to be, fair but tough, and it needs to be something that we keep an eye on. And I got no problem with what your force is doing.
Anybody else? I'll just echo Councilmember Rocky. Chief, we appreciate your leadership on the police force. You know, you point to a great statistic there. We have the lowest crime rate we've ever had in this city, and it is most probably due to you and your leadership on that force. So please continue doing what you're doing. I wholeheartedly support Officer Carter. I hope this thing gets turned around and resolves in her favor, because we need people like that out there policing our city. So keep it up, and I applaud you, Deputy Chief, Captain in the back there. Thank you for all that you do.
No, I appreciate that. Just so you know, there was nothing in the 2017 IA, that was a violation of police department policy in state law. And Sarah Carter did not receive any discipline. And in fact, she had not been harmed at all by the city. So I think it's important to go ahead and note. Secondly, the review of the transcript. I mean, we've been going through transcripts. We've been going through any and everything that we can go ahead and find to try and figure out what happened in that courtroom in this court case. And our review of the transcripts, along with the attorney from Olson & Olson, Brian Begley, who's gone ahead and reviewed it, he's reported to the city manager, there's nothing in there that constitutes a violation of state law or police department policy. To be sure, did she have a bumpy ride there for a day and a half on the stand? Did sometimes she testify truthfully at her own peril? Yeah, that happened. That happened. That's a training, that's a mentoring, that's a coaching piece. But there's nothing there to discipline her for. So with that in mind, when we got the judge's ruling, initially we suspended her, while we reviewed the situation. But that suspension was lifted earlier this week because there is just no grounds to take disciplinary action. So what's next for her? Well, I mean, there's, obviously a period of time here where she's going to be on administrative leave until the DAs finish reviewing what they need to review. But it's not that they're reviewing anything that has her out on administrative leave. We're affording her employee assistance services. And we want her to be able to be focused on that and not to be at work right now. So with that, thanks for your time, and really appreciate the support we've gotten from the community and the support we've received from you elected officials. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Item 8, municipal budget for fiscal year 2021-2022. Receive and discuss presentation regarding the municipal budget for fiscal year 21-22. Discuss and take possible action regarding action on the proposed ad valorem tax rate for 2021. To place a proposal to adopt a rate on September 13th, 2021 City Council agenda, and to schedule any required public hearing. And C, consider setting a public hearing regarding the City of Friendswood fiscal year 2021-2022 proposed budget.
So Mayor, before we get to those items, Katina's going to give a broad overview of our proposed budget for fiscal year 22. It's a continuation of what we discussed at the retreat in July. So,
thank you,
Katina.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, citizens and guests. As Murad mentioned, we are here to review the proposed budget as it was presented to you by the charter deadline of August 1st. So our focus is mainly going to be on the general fund and the water and sewer operating funds. And we'll have a couple of slides that show the overall proposed budget. As mentioned to you during the council retreat last month, we wanted to show here for the public's viewing some key factors or budget drivers that we had to consider and address in the coming year's budget. As you'll recall, in our current year, we adopted the no new revenue rate, and that resulted in about a $391,000 impact to the budget. We had to reduce revenues by that amount, and subsequently we reduced expenditures as well. Some of those have been restored in this current fiscal year, and some will be addressed in the coming year. Also, our debt service obligations related to the voter-approved general obligation bonds that voters approved in 2019. We issued another round in the current year. And also revenue bonds that were issued in 2018 and 2020. So we have debt service obligations related to those. As we complete the bond projects, there are operational expenses that come online for the city, and some of those are addressed in the coming year's budget. Also, our operational costs to maintain the current services that our citizens have come to expect from the city. The cost of operating and doing business has increased, so we are addressing that in the coming year's budget. Our personnel costs, our most valuable asset, we believe, for the city, has some increases included in the budget for additional personnel as well as employee merit. Some of those things we'll discuss going forward. Also, deferred maintenance. This has been an issue that we have kind of kicked down the road a little bit every year, but we are seeing and experiencing some things that we can no longer continue on that path. So we are trying to address some deferred maintenance, also some deferred equipment purchases in the coming year's budget. Also, our insurance costs, not just for healthcare. Healthcare is increasing for this year. We'll address that later in the council meeting as well, but not only healthcare, but our property insurances, our windstorm, those we're seeing increases as well. So our budget's having to address those things. On this slide, this shows all funds, not just the general fund and the water sewer operating fund. So these are all of our special revenue funds are included here, as well as all of the city's funds are included here. So we are, in our proposed budget, it reflects revenues of about 125 million total. The majority of this, as you'll see, about 40% of that is anticipated and projected uses of fund balance, as well as retained earnings in several of our funds to address some capital project needs that are related to GO bonds issuance, revenue bond issuances. Also, some of the grant revenues that we are receiving are included in that amount. Our next largest portion, of course, is taxes, and this is not just property taxes, but also sales tax, franchise taxes, mixed drink taxes are included in that portion. It's about 27% of the overall budget. Our intergovernmental revenues, these are grant revenues. Also, some of our interlocal agreements with like our school districts for security purposes are included there. A big portion of this, though, is grant revenue that we have applied for, and we anticipate getting reimbursements in the coming year. About 15% of our budget is included in intergovernmental revenues. About 14% are in our charges for services. This is not just, it's utility charges for services for water and sewer utilities, as well as some of our parks and recreation facility rentals there, and that's about 14%. Miscellaneous revenue is about 10.2 million, or about 11% of our overall budget. This also includes, and it's actually a reduction from last year because we were anticipating that next round of GO bonds being issued there. But included in miscellaneous revenue are some of our sales tower rental agreements and funds that come from that, as well as administrative services or administrative fees for like our garbage service. The remaining 4% is made up of building permits, our internal vehicle lease program, and also interest earnings and fines and fees. Our next slide shows our total expenditures. Again, all funds As you can see, it's about 23 million that was presented in the proposed budget. We did receive some information that we'll share with you a little bit later in the presentation. Our largest expenditure category for this year is about 70.2 million, and that's from those, again, capital projects that we're expecting to complete in the fiscal year coming up. That's about 57%. Our public safety is our next largest part of our overall budget. It's about 13%, and this includes the police department, fire marshal's office, EMS, as well as our contract with Friendswood Volunteer Fire Department. Our public works public works makes up about 9% of our expenditures. This is streets and drainage on the general fund side, and then also on the public works side. So that's about 11%, or 9%, I'm sorry. Debt service makes up about 9.8 million of our overall budget. This is not just general obligation. Again, this is all funds, so it includes our debt service payments related to those revenue bonds that we've issued as well. General government, this includes our city manager's office, city attorney, city secretary, administrative services, human resources, IT are included in that general government piece of the pie chart there, about 6%. And also Parks and Rec makes up another 3%, and then the remaining 4% is community development, engineering, library, and our internal vehicle leases. And if at any time you have questions, please feel free to jump in. Let's shift our focus to the general fund for the next portion of our presentation. Our total presentation of general fund revenues in the proposed budget was 31.7 million. As you can see here, and as usual, taxes make up the majority of our general fund revenue source. About 50% is property taxes, and then another 30% is sales tax, as well as franchise taxes. And the another 19% comes from our fines and fees in the general fund, as well as permits and charges for services. And in the next slide, we'll show you a little bit more detail on these. As you can see here, our proposed general fund revenue in the proposed budget was about 32 million. You can see the breakdown here of our revenue sources in the general fund. Property taxes are up about, or we are anticipating them being up about 1.3 to 1.5 million. And our sales tax, we're projecting that to be an increase of about right at 800, a little under 800,000 for the coming year. And that's just based on the trends that we've seen in sales tax revenue for the year.
And just to interject there, that's 800,000 over the budgeted amount from the previous year. Our actual collections have been on par with those forecasts.
As you can see, our franchise taxes, our license and permits, charges for services, and our miscellaneous interest, or miscellaneous, which includes interest and sales tax revenue, those we're projecting a little bit of a downward trend, so that's reflected in the coming year's budget. Our sales tax, our fines, interfund transfers, which is water and sewer fund into the general fund to cover some of those administrative type duties where we have employees that are paid from the general fund, but also do work in support of our utilities, the utility side of the city. So those are the revenues that we're projecting to increase by the amounts that are reflected. We'll shift gears and talk a little bit about our proposed tax rate, or what we based our budget. It's not our proposed tax rate yet. This is what we developed the budget, was based on holding flat. As of this afternoon, we did receive some updated information from the Harris County Central Appraisal District, which it actually will change our net taxable value for the coming year. It will adjust that down, and as a result, it'll be about 342,000 that we're going to need to adjust from the budget that we presented to council. and that's a reduction in revenue. So on the opposite side of that, we've got to either make adjustments, and we're looking at this now to either adjust our other revenue sources or reduce expenditures, and at the same time holding at the tax rate that we included in the proposed budget.
So when staff presented y'all with the draft budget this past Friday, we had a proposal of a flat tax rate of 48 cents. The effective tax rate of the no new revenue rate in that draft budget was 44.5 cents. Then the new no new revenue rate, or the new effective tax rate, is 45 cents and some change. We're still recommending a flat tax rate, and we're making some adjustments in the other revenues and expenditures to be able to still hold true with what we had proposed to council. I will note that on this slide, you see a debt service obligation on the general fund side of 4.3 million. It's up 600,000 this year. It was up 300 plus thousand last year. This increase alone this year represents 1.4 pennies on the tax rate. So that 45-cent tax rate to the maintaining a 48-cent tax rate, nearly a penny and a half of it is just the debt that we promised the voters when they approved the projects in 2019 that their taxes would go up.
And holding at our.
I have a question on that. Is it true that the debt does not count against the no new tax rate?
It is not. It counts against the voter approved tax rate threshold. It does count against the no new revenue rate. So from the no new revenue rate perspective, it doesn't matter what happens to the debt service. It still impacts us. Since it doesn't impact us on the voter approved tax rate simply because the voters approved the debt.
As you can see also on this slide, we have about $76 million in new construction that'll be added to our tax roll for this coming year, or we anticipate that. At the time of certification, which was July 26th, we still had, of our property tax values, about $249 million was still under protest. So at some point that will become certified, or it will be exempted by the appraisal review board. We anticipate around 85% of that to become certified and added to our tax rolls. As Murad mentioned, our debt service obligation related to those GO bonds for this coming year is about $4.3 million. All right, moving on. We wanted to provide some additional information that compares our city's tax rate to our operations and maintenance growth, and also to reflect those general obligation debt service issuances as they relate to what our voters approved. As you can see, our maintenance or our operations and maintenance cost has grown in this 12-year time span that's shown here on the chart. From about, well, it's about $10 million in growth in our O&M from 2010 to our current year. That's the yellow line that's charting across. And the bars show our adopted rate compared to the no new revenue. I was like, I was trying to find my chart.
What I like about this chart is that it illustrates, for the vast majority of the last 12 years, we've adopted the no new revenue rate or less. The only years in which we did not do that, we adopted a rate higher than the no new revenue rate, were the years that we issued debt associated with a voter-approved bond program. So the voters said, yes, we believe these projects have sufficient worth that we want to increase our taxes to pay for them. And outside of that, we've adopted something less. The only growth that the city has seen is new values, new construction. We've lived off that new construction for the last 12 years. And in some respects to the detriment of our operations and maintenance, but the data speaks for itself.
And as Murad mentioned, 9 out of the 12 years that's shown here, we've either adopted no new revenue or the effective tax rate, as it was called at that time, or less.
So those figures you see in the white box and the black letters are the years that we've issued debt. So those are the years that
Mo, when we originally started talking about a flat tax rate, we were talking about a no new revenue rate plus 1.5% flat over a multi-year financial plan. That's what I understood we were talking about. I don't really see 48 cents as a flat tax. That's just a tax rate that we're choosing for 2021, 2022. But in the multi-year financial plan, we were looking at 1.5 cents over the new net revenue so that we could cover the obligations of the debt. And I saw, if you see the slide before that, our debt at 4.3 million is about 1.4 cents of the budget. I'm just wanting to be clear because I misunderstood what we were looking at as far as what is a flat tax rate over no new net revenue. I thought that was 1.5 cents over no new net revenue. The no new net revenue came in at 44 cents, and now we're saying 48 cents is what we're looking at. It's not really a flat tax rate. It's just the tax rate that we're choosing for this year.
So
Flat, meaning it's the same tax rate as last year. So no growth, no decrease, flat.
And the one
Oh, we're
point,
just choosing last year's tax rate.
yes.
Based on last
that's
year.
what we're,
Oh,
what the budget was
regardless of
developed.
regardless of how much the
Mhm.
the values of the property have gone up.
So historically, the city of Friendswood has adopted the no new revenue rate, or what was previously known as the effective tax rate. So if the values went up, we lowered our rate. If the values went down, we increased our rate, so that we brought in roughly the same amount of money from one tax year to the next.
Okay, so that's what you mean by flat tax rate. We're just picking our last year's tax rate and staying with it.
That's what
staying flat.
our budget's developed
Okay,
on.
correct.
Yes, sir.
So it-
And
The
the,
multi-year financial plan is what we were looking at, 1.5 cents over no new net revenue, and that would cover our debt obligation.
and the 1.4 cents on the last slide that covers the increase in debt service from last year to this year. We went from 3.7 million to
That's why I
4.3
thought
million.
in the multi-year financial plan, we were saying, let's raise it 1.5 cents to cover the obligations, because the voters did agree to issue debt. And I agree with that. Okay. I see what we're talking about now.
Okay. All right. And this next slide reflects our property tax revenue and the tax rate that's been adopted. So just another view of this. And the bar chart shows our M&O portion of our tax levy. The gold there shows the debt service portion of our tax levy. And then the red line reflects our tax rate and the changes in those over the last 12 years looking back. With each general obligation debt issuance, the INS, or the debt service portion of the tax rate, grows to pay down that debt service obligation. And that has grown from 2 million in 2010 to, as I mentioned, 4.3 million in the current year. And when we adopt, as Murad mentioned, when we adopt the no new revenue rate, our only growth that we see is coming from the new properties that are added to the tax roll. It's in the multi-year financial.
Which
Believe me, your name is on it. That's how we refer to. That's how we refer to.
Katina, go back one slide,
Sure.
because that previous slide shows that red line is our tax rate.
Correct.
And look how that thing is coming down. And yeah, this year we're talking about not coming down, but staying the same. But look how low. That's the lowest tax rate Friendswoodians have ever paid in the history of
40 years.
collecting property taxes.
I think
So
it's been 40 years.
It
maybe
is
the
still a part of the equation. It's going to continue to go down as long as those blue lines continue to go up. But if you went back one slide previous to that, I would say that it's remarkable for a city that's grown like we have to have elected officials in a city government that 9 of 12 years did not increase their revenue. So we've done a tremendous job. The staff has done a tremendous job of utilizing the funds that have been given it for over a 12-year period where they did not get an increase in revenue.
But
That
Matt-
is a remarkable slide. The tax rate slide is not as remarkable because property appraised values are soaring. So the rate's going to continue to drop. That is impressive.
But I think
That
Murad-
slide is impressive.
But I think Murad made an excellent point, that we've really and truly been living off of our new construction and new taxation. And Friendswood is landlocked. That can't continue forever. We know that. So we've got to be smart now about how we're handling this going forward. Otherwise, we're going to one day have a really big problem. Whereas if we address it early on, it can take baby steps to mediate that. But if we wait until it's here, we're going to have a big issue on our hands. So I would like to just caution us that, yes, it's admirable, but we need to continue to be smart about how we approach this.
And to augment John's comment, in the middle of that, in 2013, we had a bond that allowed us to go up 5 cents, and we didn't. We ate it.
Correct.
So,
All right. Right, on the general fund expenditure side, in the proposed budget, we reflect 33.5 million. As I mentioned, we will be looking at some reductions on this for our, as we move through the budget to adoption. As you'll see here, our personnel on the general fund makes up the majority of our expenditures. And then the non-personnel as well as capital improvements makes up another 32%. Or 33% of that. So our personnel expenses, of course, it's all salaries, wages, health insurance, dental insurance, all of those insurance, and it also includes employee merit. And our non-personnel is the rest of our budget, those services, supplies, maintenance, and then we have in our capital improvements, the $500,000 for street improvements is maintained in the general fund, as we have seen in the past, and we also have about $900,000 for furniture, fixtures, and equipment related to the public safety building expansion, fire station number 2 coming online with the new fire station, as well as Black Hawk building renovations and the EOC upgrades. So we've got some furniture, fixtures, and equipment included in that capital improvements line.
And just to emphasize that point, those are components of the bond projects, but they're not going to be included in the debt service for it. So we're not going to buy a new desk for a new office in the public safety building and finance that cost over 30 years. Those are costs that are going to come out of this year's budget.
Wait, while John's away, is there really any reason to keep that $500,000 allocated as a GL line simply because now we have the 3/8 cents and the 1/8 cents? We're getting $2 million a year. When he initiated that $500,000, and that's the slide he's won, I guess, they didn't have that money coming in, so we had to earmark something for it. Isn't that kind of obsolete now that we keep John's $500,000 in there and that could possibly be moved around?
That's
to defray the focus, it is a philosophical question for council to make, as Katina was alluding to. To John's point, and I'm not,
John on that. No. I agree with Robert on this.
I'm not defending any council person here. The problem with the sales tax election as it pertains to streets is that it does sunset every 4 years, and so we have to continually go out to the voters for that renewal.
We could put that $500,000 back when we lose those taxes,
and that is a viable option.
I'm just saying it because he's not here.
well, actually, to tell you the truth, I think the slide that John always comments on is the one where she shows the projection.
It's in the multi-year
and
financial plan. Mm-hmm. Right. It's in that slide's in our multi-year financial plan. So that's true. It was. So this gives a little bit more detail about the expenditures that are included in the proposed budget. Our personnel makes up about $22.3 million. It does include funding for employee merit at about 2.75%. Health insurance, health and dental insurance increases, as well as some additional personnel that we'll talk more about later in the budget. And our non-personnel expenditures are about 11.4 million, and this is just our current service operations aside from personnel, deferred maintenance and equipment, furniture, fixtures, and equipment, as well as the 500,000 for streets, and forces at work and decision packages totaling about 377,000 aside from what we've added for personnel. And this is our list of funded forces at work. And again, as a reminder, forces at work are things that are really out of our control. They impact our budget, but we don't have much say over what they are, how much they are, and those types of things. So we have an addition to our fleet in the police department for school resource officer. Also, our EMS and fire services contracts with FPFD. In those contracts, they allow for an annual increase, and so that is reflected here, as well as our health insurance increase. And we'll leave that there for a little bit. It's also reflected in your proposed budget document on page 329. This is a list of the decision packages that we are reflecting as funded in our proposed budget. As I won't go through each one of them, but the total is about 938,000, roughly 939,000 in decision packages. Again, related to most of it's employee merit that is that 2.75%, and then the rest are, as you can see, there are a lot of maintenance and issues, but we also have some personnel that we have been hoping for, needing in for a long period of time, including the digital services specialist at the library, an engineering intern, a parks laborer, and the intern and the parks laborer positions are currently in the budget as part-time, but in our proposed budget, we'll be moving those to full-time positions, or we're proposing to do that. And I thought there was one other. And then our unfunded decision packages, based on our funding limitations, there were two that we could not, that we would not be able to fund, but also on this slide shows the tax rate equivalent for funding those and what the tax rate would need to be to get those two items in the budget. And this information is on page 330 in the budget. Any questions on general fund before we shift to water sewer?
I had one question, and I'm going to make you go backwards, but you're projecting that the franchise tax would go down.
Mhm.
Why was the reason? Or what was the reason? Excuse me?
Actually, there was legislation passed that reduces some of the telecommunications franchise fees. We were getting,
That makes sense.
some of
I
them were
forgot about that.
twofold, and those have gone away.
The state was helping us.
Yes.
Yeah, and I forgot, and I knew about
Yeah.
that, and I forgot, so thank you.
You're welcome.
I will mention, Katina listed it as a bullet point early on, deferred maintenance. A number of the items that you had previously seen in a decision package list this year and in prior years are not included on the screen tonight, simply because we're funding them out of fund balance later on this evening in the budget amendment. As an example, you can't have a police officer but not have a police vehicle. They're useless. And for a number of years, as equipment have failed, we would go without, just so that we wouldn't impact the tax rates or the overall budgets. We have the money in fund balance. That's what it's intended to be used for, is one-time capital expenditures. The roof at the activity building. You'll see these items from time to time as they come up, and we'll note them if it's a deferred maintenance item, but it shouldn't be an item up for discussion for taxing purposes.
That was going to be my question.
Real quick on the general fund, if we adopt the proposed rate, that is an increase on a percentage basis of how much revenue?
So it will be, and while they're looking up that figure, the no new revenue rate is 45 cent. We're proposing a 48.73 cent tax rate. It's well below the voter approved tax rate with the unused increment. So that figure is roughly 53 cents. I want to say it's a 3%, 3.1 or 3.2% increase over last year.
Over last year? Or?
Yes.
Yes.
The additional 1.5 million in property taxes
Yes.
over the previous year. Yeah.
So 3.5% increase?
3.1 to 3.2.
3.1, 3.2?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Shifting gears to our water and sewer operating fund in the proposed budget. In the proposed budget, we've got 17.6 million in water sewer revenues. About 98% of that comes from charges for services for water and sewer utilities. As you'll see on the next slide, we'll have a little bit more detail on which of these increased or decreased. The other 2% comes from administrative fees in the water and sewer fund, from penalties and interest, disconnection, reconnection fees, and the like. Some water meter. On our, if you go one forward, here it just shows a little bit more detail on the revenues in the water and sewer operating fund. As you can see, we're expecting increases in our sewer charges as well as some administrative fees, and our meter sales are going to stay flat, and interest rates, like everywhere, are really low. So we're expecting those to be less than what we've budgeted in the current year. And also our water revenues, we're anticipating about a $27,000 decrease from our budget this year. And these trends are they're based on trends. So our estimates are based on the trends that we're seeing as of right now. Our water and sewer operating fund expenditures, we're expecting about 16.8 million, and this is what we have projected in the budget. This is about a $700,000 increase from our adopted budget for this year. And again, it's just based on what we're seeing. Also on this side, we have some deferred maintenance and equipment purchases that we have included on this. In this fund, it's the opposite of the general fund, because the majority of these expenditures are non-personnel related, because they're related to the service contracts that we have with the City of Houston for our purchased water and for operating the Southeast Water Purification Plant, as well as the Black Hawk Wastewater Treatment Plant. So we see almost the opposite in our funds, in our operating funds. In the water sewer fund, about 2.8 million is personnel, and the other 14 million is non-personnel expenditures, and they're kind of listed here. Some of the highlights are the big points there. We have additional personnel that we're proposing on the water sewer side. It's 2 additional employees in the Public Works Department. And we also have forces at work and decision packages that we're going to show on the next slide. Our debt service obligation from the revenue bonds is about 4.8 million. So, and that's related to bonds that we previously issued. Our funded forces at work in the water sewer operating fund, I'll leave it there for a couple of minutes for you to peruse. This list is also found on page 329 in the proposed budget document. And our next slide will show our funded decision packages. This is what we have included in the proposed budget for funding. The decision packages on the water sewer side total about 506,000. They also include employee merit, as we saw on the general fund side. And you can see here some of the equipment purchases that we'll need to be making, as well as the additional personnel. And on the next slide, we have no unfunded decision packages on the water sewer side. We were able to fund all that the department saw a need for there. And the last slide that we have is our next steps leading to budget and tax rate adoption. We delivered the proposed budget last week, prior to the charter required deadline. We're having our first budget work session tonight. We'll also ask council later in the meeting to announce and schedule a special meeting to hold our public hearing on the proposed budget. That's a charter requirement for us. And also we'll have a public hearing on the tax rate, and then hopefully adopt the budget and the tax rate on September 13th. So we thank y'all always for your input, and the budget is, I often say, it's one of the most collaborative things that we do in the city, because it does involve everybody. So we appreciate your guidance and all of the input from the departments. Any other questions?
Thanks, Katina. I don't have a question. I'll just say I applaud you. Another great budget that you've crafted here, and
It's everybody.
yeah, I know. Rhonda's sitting right behind
Rhonda's
you.
there, Emily is there,
Emily's back
Jeff's there. I was
Jeff,
like, we got
yeah.
several staff members.
So great job. I applaud the fact that we're keeping our tax rate flat and able to do all these things, and I am voting for that tax rate.
Thank you so much. We appreciate y'all.
May I?
want to congratulate you too. I think this is the most fun budget, one of the best ones since I've been on council as far as getting some things funded, especially deferred maintenance and other things like that. So I'm really glad to hear that, and I'm sure y'all are happy about it too.
Yes, ma'am.
Great job.
This end, John, come on, you got something that's.
No comment.
No comment? You loving this budget? You loving this?
No comment. No comment.
Well, as we learned last year, and remind us last year, we needed a supermajority to approve this tax rate in this budget. So we'll.
So there is an agenda item 8B, discuss and take possible action on the proposed ad valorem tax rate of a flat tax rate. This is not a binding vote on the part of council. You will have an official vote in September adopting the tax rate, but we do need to have consensus from y'all to hold a public hearing later this month and then move forward with the
Okay.
budget.
Let me read that. Discuss and take possible action regarding action on the proposed ad valorem tax rate for 2021, and to place a proposal to adopt a rate on the September 13th, 2021 City Council agenda and to schedule any required public hearings.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any more discussion? So those motion and that second are in favor of this flat tax rate, 48 and change.
But how you vote tonight's not going to set the tax rate. So
I understand that. I'm just pointing
What's
out
gonna be
to
published.
yes.
the folks what this motion and second
Sure.
mean.
Is there a reason why we're voting? It's a work session item, right? I mean, don't you just
Get
generally
consensus.
look for consensus by a nod ahead or?
The first item is a works.
That burned us last
So
year, John.
the first item is a work
Yeah.
session item. So 8A
you
is a
did.
work session item. 8B is a discussion and action item. But you may recall last month we changed or 2 months ago we changed our rules of procedure to allow you to group items that are like in topics, so that you didn't vote on 8. You don't discuss 8B several hours after having a workshop. We felt it was better to group them.
Isn't this
And
the one that you'll
we-
publish though as a proposed
That's
tax
correct,
rate?
and we do have to take a record vote on,
Yeah.
Correct.
on the proposed.
So point of order, since this is a consensus item, does it need a supermajority or just a majority to move to the next step?
This one is a majority.
Yes. Again, you're not setting the tax rate. We're taking a vote in order to publish the proposed tax rate.
Anybody else? All in favor? Excellent. All right.
And then 8C, consider setting.
Consider setting a public hearing regarding the City of Friendswood fiscal year 2021-2022 proposed budget. I need a motion for the proposed date for the hearing of Monday, August 30th in the council chambers at City Hall.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Third.
Motion and a second. So just remind us one more time why we're having a public hearing.
So the no new revenue rate, or what was previously known as the effective tax rate, is roughly 45 cents. The proposed tax rate that staff has proposed as part of this budget is 48 cents. It's a flat tax rate from the current fiscal year. Technically a tax increase with increase in property values.
Okay, got it. Got a motion and a second. All in favor? See you August 30th. Item 9, request for zoning ordinance amendments to building height exceptions. Aubrey Harbin, CDD Director. I now call to order this public hearing to receive comments, both oral and written, regarding a proposed amendment to Appendix C zoning ordinance, Section 7Q2, Regulation Matrix, Commercial Districts, and Regulation Matrix, Residential Districts, in order to clarify reference notes and Section 7Q.3, area and height exceptions to add an exception for building height. I would now like to ask staff to summarize the subject of this public hearing. Aubrey?
Good evening. So these proposed amendments do intend to amend the building height exception, or to amend the building height exceptions for our commercial districts outside of the downtown district. So that includes this community shopping center, neighborhood commercial, light industrial, industrial business park, and office park district. And it also clarifies some reference notes on both the commercial and residential regulation matrices. There was just some cleanup that needed to be done there. No substantial changes, just cleanup. If you remember last year, the commission and staff focused on some changes to the building height, but it was exceptions for attachments on top of buildings. such as finials, crosses, and other religious symbols. And so those changes were adopted, but this will now allow commercial districts to allow buildings up to 70 feet tall, as long as they're set back a minimum of 2.5 times the building height from the nearest single-family residential zoning. So the Planning and Zoning Commission had their public hearing and made a recommendation on July 22nd, 7-0 to approve the proposed amendments. And just further clarification is Friendswood's undeveloped commercial lots become fewer and their prices rise, allowing taller buildings in commercial zoning districts can enhance the economic viability for some commercial projects and allow them to be developed. Commercial development and diversifying the tax base are current goals of the city as it relates to Vision 2020 and the future land use plan.
Okay, the city secretary informs me we don't have any speakers tonight for this public hearing, so I now close this public hearing regarding proposed amendments to Appendix C zoning ordinance, Section 7Q2, Regulation Matrix, Commercial Districts, and Regulation Matrix, Residential Districts. Item B, consideration and possible action regarding a proposed ordinance for the first reading of an ordinance for proposed amendments to Appendix C zoning ordinance, Section 7Q2, Regulation Matrix, Commercial District, and Regulation Matrix, Residential Districts in order to clarify reference notes and 7Q3 area and height exceptions to add an exception for building height.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Anybody further discuss? All in favor? All right, before moving on, I'd like to recess for about 5 minutes, take a quick hygiene break. So see you right back here in a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You'll note we have two celebrities in our audience tonight, both from the library. Recently, our very own Madeline Short and Diane Freeman were recognized for their efforts this past year with the Library Gala, as well as some outstanding book sale coordination, that both of which have raised a considerable amount of money for the library. We appreciate both Madeline and Diane for their efforts, as well as the library staff for everything they do year in and year out. It's an exceptional department, and one of the ones that I enjoy most visiting because it's always laid back and they're having a good time.
Does that fall under you or Stephen?
So Stephen, I gave him all the easy departments, and then I took.
Ah, that's funny.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's his favorite Stephen department. That's
Yes.
not his favorite, his department.
Yes. No.
I'm sure his city secretary.
Yeah.
Gave me permission last time.
Oh, wow. I forgot.
No, but
Mo, in
Yes.
case everyone doesn't know, would you have them stand?
yes. So Madeline, Diane, would y'all please stand for a minute?
So Maddie, does anybody else call you Madeline, really?
Just my dad, really.
Only when you're in trouble?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so
So noted.
Maddie Short.
Maddie Short. Okay,
Yes.
got it.
That's okay.
Yes. And then I would have, yes. I would have. My fault. The last item on my report is just to remind y'all that we will not have a meeting on Labor Day. Because of the holiday, it's been moved to the 13th of September. Typically, y'all vote on this during the consent agenda, but with the recent change in our rules of procedure, it's just an informational item for y'all, just to let you know that that took place. I approve. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Murad. Item 11, recess the city council meeting. We will now recess the Friendswood City Council regular meeting and convene the Friendswood Employee Benefit Trust meeting. There should be a paper copy of this agenda packet at each council member's place. Lost 3 more.
So,
The library people.
as y'all are getting ready to discuss these items, just as a reminder, a few years back, I believe it was 2011, the city entered into what's known as an employee benefits trust that's made up of you guys as city council members. You represent the board of directors of the trust. Doing so allows us to save quite a bit of money on the tax side when we acquire health insurance and other benefits, roughly about 50 or 60,000 a year, depending on the year.
And as I saw in our budget discussion, our health care plans are going up about $110,000.
10,000, yes, sir. Yes, sir. And we do have representatives for Gallagher this evening. Bob Tracy, if you have any questions on any of these items.
Okay, I need a motion to approve consent agenda items 2A through 2F.
Motion to approve.
All in favor? I now adjourn the August 2nd, 2021 Friendswood Employee Benefit Trust meeting and reconvene the city council meeting. Move on to business item 13. Discuss and take possible action regarding the authorization of the monthly transfer of funds from the City of Friendswood to the City of Friendswood Employee Benefit Trust.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor? Discuss and take possible action on RFQ 2021-07 for architectural and engineering services for Black Hawk renovations project.
Second.
Motion is second. I'm sure we're giving it to PGAL again. Actually, I know that. I shouldn't say it that way. I'm just joking.
They're the architect on the other half of the building, so it only makes sense. So.
Yeah, good call. Okay, all in favor? Discuss and take possible action regarding the rejection of all bids for RFP 2021-10 for water meter reading services.
Motion to approve.
All in favor? Discuss and take possible action regarding the renewal of the water meter reading services contract between the City of Friendswood and Infomark, formerly known as Severn Trent.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor? Resolutions and ordinances. Consideration and possible action regarding a proposed resolution of the City Council of the City of Friendswood, Texas, approving the public funds management and investment policy.
Motion to approve.
Just a little background.
The investment committee for the city just recently met and they did their annual review of the public funds management investment policy. There's only a single change in the policy this year. What was previously referred to as the comprehensive annual financial report, CAFR, has been renamed to the annual.
Turn your mic on.
Very minor.
I am so sorry. So that was the best speech I've ever given. There was one change to the investment policy, changing the reference from the comprehensive annual financial report to the annual comprehensive financial report, to industry change in that particular nomenclature.
All in favor? Consideration and possible action regarding a proposed ordinance for the second and final reading of an ordinance approving a zone classification change located at 1715 and 1771 South Friendswood Drive, also known as Reserves D and F in the Howard Subdivision Partial Replat Number 2, Friendswood, Galveston County, Texas, to change from Community Shopping Center and Office Park District to Planned Unit Development.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor? Where'd Mrs. Tanos go? She was here. Guess she had to leave. Consideration and possible action regarding a proposed ordinance for the first and final reading of an ordinance amending City of Friendswood, Texas, ordinance number 2020-35, passed and approved September 14th, 2020, same being an ordinance approving and adopting the city's general budget for fiscal year 2020-2021 by approving Budget Amendment 10 to the original general budget of the City of Friendswood, Texas for the fiscal year 2020-2021, providing for supplemental appropriation and/or transfer of certain funds, providing for severability, and providing other matters related to the subject.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor? Got to turn the page here, make sure there's no tricks in
Motion
here.
to adjourn.
You don't need one.
Second.
We're adjourned.
We
That's right. We don't need.